a secret to my success, which was I had to learn Excel almost overnight. Back in the day, there was something called Lotus 1-2-3, and that was the software that we used to do all of our number calculations. And then this thing called Excel started creeping into the marketplace. And my boss, I worked for the Guardian Life Insurance Company, and I worked in the finance department. And my boss said, you have to convert all of the data and all of the reports to Excel, and you have a week. So I knew nothing. I'd never taken a course in Excel, and I had to learn little by little. And over the years, you know, if you know 2 or 3 more things than anybody else, that makes you the expert. And that's pretty much what happened to me. I had a lot of consulting gigs. And when I wasn't working, when I had downtime, which means I was unemployed, I went to Google and I said, Google, how do you do this? How do you do that? And over the years, I've learned a few tricks. So I'm going to give you, I'm not going to give you a lesson where you're going to take notes. What I'm going to ask you to do is jot down the topics and then go to Google and see. You could learn for yourself. None of these things that I'm going to show you are, quote, difficult. What I want to do today is create some discovery of what's possible. So I'm going to pretend that you are my boss and you have a monthly sales report. And it was a data dump, which is what they call it, from the sales offices. And I am expected to create information out of this data dump. And I'm going to do it with Excel reporting. So my boss expects me to be able to do a few basic functions that allow him to analyze this data. And here we go. So I'm going to share my screen. And I have to assume that you can all hear me. All right, this is a typical data dump. And can you all see this? I don't.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I, at the bottom of the screen, have typed in the tab raw data. So I'm going to scroll all the way down. And you can't see it perhaps, but I have 569 records of information. And this information was a sales report. And I have several different countries, China, Italy, the Netherlands. I have several different products, several different customers. I have discounts, I have currency, I have sales in both the local currency and US dollars. And my boss expects me to come up with a report. So there's a couple challenges to this. The first thing we're going to talk about is sorting data. And the reason why I want to sort data is I'm going to put my cursor on invoice. Let's see if I can't make this a little larger. On invoice. And I don't know if you know how to do this, but as you can see, this is kind of cut off. And if you put your cursor here and double click, you can enlarge your column. So I am going to use the commands Control and down. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to see very frequently invoice numbers are missing. It's just the way data is. And I'm going to use Control and down again. And what this is doing is it's telling the computer to go to the go to the last piece of information in that range. So if I hit Control down, that's the first piece, Control down, that's the last piece. So obviously I've got a lot of data problems. So now I'm hitting Control home, that takes me to the very top. So the first thing I want to do is I want to sort this data so that all my missing invoice numbers are at the bottom. And then I'll take that piece of information to my boss and say, these are the countries, these are the products that are missing invoice numbers. So the first thing I'm going to do is sort this data. And in order to sort the data, I just want to show you, there's something called data. And then here's a sort button. So on your toolbar, data and sort. All right, so in order to sort the data, I have to first of all highlight, and I'm doing Control, Shift, and my right key, which takes me all the way to the last bit of data, and then Control, Shift down. I'm going to keep doing that because I know that I'm missing data, which is not allowing me to go to the very bottom. Okay, that's my last. So I'm all the way over to, I think it's column AA, and I'm all the way down to row 569. All right, so now that I have highlighted the data I want to sort, I click the sort button, and the sort button asks me, what column do you want to sort the data by? It also has a little button up right here, and it says, my data has headers. So the titles of your columns are called headers. And you want to make sure that you have checked this. Yes, my data has headers, because you don't want this row to be sorted. You want it to stay at the top. So it's identifying it not as data, but as a column header. Then, let's see if I can't make this larger. It asks me, what column do you want to sort by? So it's assuming that every single one of these columns has a name, a header. So I want to sort by, and it happens to be the first column, invoice number. And it asks me smallest to largest, largest to smallest, or something else. And I'm just going to hit OK. And then it says, do you want to sort numbers and numbers stored as text separately? And I'm going to just say yes. All right, now what did this do? Every single row contains exactly the same amount of information. It sorted all the rows so that this column or this row right here, all the information that followed is identical. So now I'm going to hit Control down. Well, that should, there we go. And all of my missing data is now at the bottom. So I can go to my boss and say, hey, boss, this part is missing. And one of two things will happen. He will either go back to the source, or he'll say, well, ignore it. We'll deal with that later. So that's the first trick, is if you need to clean up the data and you need to find out where the problems are in the data, sorting helps a lot. The second thing we're going to do is what we call filtering. And this was a real aha to me. I was very excited about this. Filtering allows you to find data very quickly. And in order to filter, when you go back to your home screen, again, you click the data button and then you click filter. And filter, I don't know if you saw that, all of a sudden, next to every single header, a little tiny filter icon appears. And this is now a drop-down button that allows you to select or deselect data. And it appears in every single column. I didn't have to keep doing it. Every single column has a little tiny drop-down button menu. All right, so I want to filter. Let's see. Let's filter by sales country. There's a select all button, but I just want to see Brazil. I click OK, and there's Brazil. Now, why would you need this? Why is this important? Because your boss said, give me the numbers on that Brazil sales rep. I want to see where he is. So you don't know the name of the sales rep, but you do know Brazil. Okay, here's my sales rep. And he's going to say, give me a report on what that guy did this month. Oh, this month. Okay, I'm now in the month of April. Okay, April it is. Okay, very simple. I have 500 records. I can very quickly produce this information. All right, now I'm going to unfilter it. Okay, the next thing I want to do is to show you how to do a formula. And a formula, I'm going to just clear this. I have sales, but I also have costs. And my boss says, well, what are the sales? What's my profit here? All formulas are done the same way. It's a mathematical calculation, and it starts with the equal sign. And to create a formula, I'm literally going to go to the cell. I want to say, take my sales, subtract my local costs, and give me my net profit. In order to do that, I could do one of two things. I could either say, all right, this is cell M2. I could say equals M2 minus, and this is cell P2. All right, I have to put a bracket around it because that's what the computer expects. And I could hit enter. Oops. All right, but that's very time consuming. So I'm going to clear that. So Excel allows you to write a formula by referencing the cell, not typing the cell. So here we go, equals, and then I put my cursor on here. And you see right here, this is called the formula bar. That is now highlighted. The M2 is highlighted. I don't have to type it. Minus, and I put my cursor here and I reference this cell, and here's the result. And again, here's the formula, and I hit the enter button. And there it is. That's my result. In order to copy that, I'm going to right click, copy. I'm going to drag that down, right click, paste. Okay. All right, and there it is. Now, double click this to make it bigger. All right, I should explain something to you that when you are doing a presentation, I'm going to say almost 100 out of 100 times, your boss is not going to want to see the cents. So what you will do in reporting later on, we'll clean it up, is you're going to get rid of the cents. He will also probably want to see a negative number as a bracketed number as opposed to having a minus sign in front of it. And he will also probably not want to see the dollar signs. So just keep that in mind. These are shortcuts because it's a lot of numbers to stare at when you're looking at results. All right, the next thing I want to show you is let me see. All right, this is as good a time as any to show you how to do the formatting. So how do I clean up this data? All right, so I'm going to highlight my data. I want to clean it up. In other words, I want to make sure that I get rid of the decimal. All right, so now I go to home, and there on your toolbar is format. And at the bottom, it says format cells. All right, so now I have a few choices. So I'm going to go to, I want to format this information as a number. I have the decimal places. It assumes I want 2 decimal places. I'm going to change that to 0. It already assumed that I wanted a comma to show you the thousands. And you could do one of a couple of things. Some people like to see their negative numbers in red. And that's it. So that's cleaning up the data. Now, one of the other things you need to know is you must, if you're going to use this and you've inserted a formula, make sure you have a header name on this. And I'll show you why later on. Right, I'm going to just leave this blank. All right, so I have a quick pause for questions. Are there any questions so far? I guess not. Yes?
Oh, no, looks good.
Okay.
Looks good.
Can everybody see the screen? I'm trying to make it as large as possible.
Yes, I think
Yes.
I see it.
Okay, fine. Am I on track? Because the next thing I want to do is my very favorite thing, and that is grouping. Actually, I'm joking. I hate grouping because I have a much better way of doing things. But grouping is something that some bosses want. And I myself don't use it very often, but again, it might be popular with some bosses. So I actually took myself through grouping. Let's see if I can do it. All right, I want to group my data. So I'm going to highlight. I'm going to come to practice. I'm going to highlight my data. By the way, there's a great trick for highlighting. Go to the very bottom of the very last row and use your Control Shift up, Control Shift over, and in 2 steps, you've gotten all of your data. So even if there's a skip row, it'll highlight all of your data for you. All right, so now we're at home. We'll go back to data, and we're going to go to the group section. You have choice of group, ungroup, and subtotal. So I'm going to pick subtotal. And it gives me the opportunity to pick what I want to subtotal. I want to see at each change in country, well, let's say each change in country, they call it here, let's see, I'm going to say region. Each change in region, I want to add up the numbers, and I happen to pick sales in US dollars. All right, I'm going to say, okay, let's see what that looks like. Ta-da. So here you have, let's go over. I have to make this a little, there's my sales in US dollars for Brazil. All right. This is very pretty, but it only tells me, I have to kind of group around to find the data. You know, it's not very easy. If I gave this to my boss, he'd say, can't you give me a better way of presenting this information? And my answer is, yes, I can. So let's go back to subtotal, cancel. Let's go back to ungroup. And this is why I don't do this very often. Highlight everything. Ungroup. As you can see, I'm not very good at this because I have a better way. All right. Now, the better way is what we call a pivot table. And this is, to me, one of the greatest tools you will ever use, because it allows you to use the same data. You don't have to move cells around. You don't have to create formulas, but you can get that same information. So your boss says, well, what are the total sales in all these different countries? I got that. I'm going to create a pivot table. First thing you do in a pivot table is, well, a pivot table allows you to filter and sort data in one fell swoop. The first thing you need to do is highlight all of the data that you're going to put into the pivot table. And I told you the easiest way to highlight a big group of data is to go to the bottom corner, shift control up, which takes you to the very top, and shift control to the left, and you have now highlighted all your data. All right, so now the range of data has been highlighted to include all of my columns and rows. Up on the toolbar, there is insert, and this selection is the pivot table. And it asks me, what is your data range? Well, I already created that. And then it says, choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. I always put it in a new worksheet and click OK. All right. So at the bottom of you'll see a new tab is created called Sheet 1. And I'm going to have to move this. And what you have is a blank table, this little box, and you have the fields, which are the column headers. So what I want to see is by sales country. So I'm going to filter this now. So I'm going to, the sales countries, I just literally drag that down to rows. I have filters, columns, rows, and values. So I want to look at that. I've just started my pivot table. How hard was that? It's not. All right, now my boss wants to see sales. All right. So I look for sales, but oh no, I want sales in US dollars. So remember, if you're dealing with international, usually he's going to see sales in US dollars. Now, I just clicked on it and the computer guessed that it wanted to see this as a value. So down here, you'll see it. It just assumed. Right? I now have the information that my boss wants. That took what? 5 seconds. So now you see the power of pivot tables as opposed to sorting, filtering, clicking, finding the subtotals. Now, again, one of the things that we don't want is we do not want this nasty looking data. We want to format this data. So how do I format this data? How do I get rid of these decimals? I go to 3, 4 decimal points. I want this to look the correct numeric format. Well, down here, come on. If I click on the sum of sales, it says I can pick the field settings and it allows me to alter the settings. So I have the sum, which is what I wanted, the sum of the sales, but here it is. This is what I'm looking for. I want to change the format. So I'm going to go to number. I want to change this to 0 decimal places. I want to put in a comma for the thousands. And if I have a negative number, I want to make it a bracket. And then I click OK. Right? And this is much, much prettier. And this is what my boss is looking for. I can send him this report. So now he is so excited. He wants to see just Brazil. Can I give you a little detail on that Brazil number, Carol? Sure, I can. Oh, and by the way, you notice that the data all the detail has disappeared. You only see it when you actually have clicked on the pivot table. You click off of it, that disappears. All right, so now I want to see Brazil. Well, how do I do that? Now I'm going to filter, I'm going to use this filter. And all I have to do is I'm going to move my sales country up to filter. All right, and now you see something that says sales country all, and I click my down arrow, and here is Brazil. And this allows me to filter on Brazil sales only. And he said, well, that's nice, but give me a little more detail. Okay, no problem. Let's click on product. So now I have given him my products. And he said, okay, but how many did you sell? No problem. You want units. I'm going to click on units. And here are my units. And he says to me, okay, well, how much per unit? You know, how much per unit? What was the unit sales price? So now I'm like, oh no, what I think he wants me to do is I think he wants me to take the number of the sales divided by the number of units. Oh my God, I have to do a formula. How do you do that? Well, this is even more fun. This is so easy. You're going to love this. I'm on here and let's see. Trying to find it. I've lost my data. Give me a minute. Your expert just forgot something. Why can I not find it? It's because it's been hidden. One of those. This is embarrassing. Well, I hate to tell you that I cannot figure out how to do this. Oh, come on. All right, let's just pause on that for a second. One of the other things that you can do in the pivot table while I figure this out is you can change the headers. And for example, you don't want sum of sales in US dollars. What you want to do is just literally type in sales USD. And then you can type in units and oh, look, it's already got units. All right, so it doesn't want me to do that. So I just add a space to it at the bottom, and there I have it. Okay, that's pretty much it. And I can't believe that I cannot remember where to do the, well, I can't see it. All right, that's pretty much it for the presentation, and I apologize for not being able to give you the balance of that because, oh. All right, well, thank you very much, and I'm going to ask you if you have any questions.
Make sure you unmute yourself, ladies, if you have any questions. Anyone has any questions? Oh, wait, they're writing it on the chat. Could you review slicers from Kelly Foster?
I'm not sure how to do that.
So if you click into the pivot table and then go to the data tab,
Yes,
um,
let me move this. Yes,
so in the data tab at the top, there's a button called Insert Slicer. If you go to the data tab at the top, the ribbon, yeah, right
Yes.
there.
Mhm.
So is it in there? Now I'm blanking. See, we always do it. Insert at the top. We go to insert and then you can select insert slicer
Yes,
and pick which field you want to slice by. So I guess this would be similar to, instead of putting it as a filter in your pivot table, you could insert a slicer by country. And
You
then
can,
toggle
yes.
between the countries that way.
you can, yes. And I think one of the nicest things about Excel is that it usually gives you 3 different ways of doing something. So if I've taught you one way, someone could say, oh, no, that's wrong. You do it this way. I'm like, well, yes, you could. So this pivot table, the reason I mentioned pivot tables is because when people were interviewing me, they'd say, do you know how to do a pivot table? Most people might not say, do you know how to use Slicer? Maybe things have updated in the last few years and they want to know both. But this pivot table mania is so entrenched in the business world. And this is a tool that is frequently used. So again, I thank you for your suggestion. Yes, you can use a Slicer. Anything else?
I have a question. This is Caroline. So,
Hi.
hi, how are you? So are most of the pivot tables like the information's already provided, or would you ever have to like really kind of create it from scratch, like, or most of the numbers are kind of already provided?
Well, that's a good question. The answer is most of the time, the data is provided. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the data.
Okay, well, I had an interview once and I had never had to do a pivot table, and that was one of the tests they gave us.
But
I
they
didn't-
didn't give you any data. They just said, make a pivot table.
Well, I think they gave us a little bit of data, but
Mhm.
as you know, as you went through the test, you had to know how to make a pivot table in order to, navigate that test. And I honestly had not been exposed to it, so I never had a need to use it. So
Right.
I wasn't, I didn't pass, unfortunately. But
Okay, so
I was just curious.
let's assume that we're back in your interview, and I'm just going to take this little bit of information right here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it in. Okay, so now we're back at your test. So to create the pivot table, you click on the pivot table icon, and then to set the range, highlight your range. All right, now here's your range. And it says, do you want this in the existing worksheet or a new worksheet? I always say new because I'm afraid I might overlay my data. And I click OK. And then what do you do? Caroline?
I'm trying to remember from the notes. Okay, so do you have to set the filters? Like I said, I'd have to go back to my notes.
Exactly.
Okay, set the filters. Okay.
All right, so I need to populate this blank with the information. And I have to put data in rows and columns. So I want to see my information by sales country. All right, so I'm going to click on sales country, and it assumes that I want that in the rows. And I'm going to click on, but that might not be the case. It might be that he wants to see this, you see? And he may want to see sales. Or he may say, no, I want to see it in rows. So it's entirely up to the needs of your boss, but that's it. The filtering comes when he wants to see just one thing. So I would take my sales country and put it into the filters box and then pick the country that he wants. All right. And then he wants to see products. So in order to create the pivot table, you need to you select pivot table, you highlight the range that you want, and then you drag and drop these headers, these column headers, to where you want to, to the box that you want based on what your boss wants. Does that sound
Yeah, that helps.
repeatable?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Because like I said, I did some of it, but I didn't do it all right. So, but that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's true that people will say, do you know how to do a pivot table? Probably, given the if you don't want to be data entry, you want to start really using the data, they're going to ask for pivot tables. And I hate to say it, but I think I was like, what? That's it? That's the big thing that everybody wants to know, and that's all that's involved? And the answer is yes. So, I am trying to remember. Aha, here we go. Remember I was talking about doing calculations? It's here. And I think this little box up here was hidden by the screen. So I'm going to give you a 2-minute, since we're still on, I'm going to give you the 2 minutes of how to do a formula. I'm going to go to sales and I have to go to the bigger screen. All right, let's create the pivot table. Insert pivot table. Okay, now what happened here? You see it says, all right, what happened here is I was missing a column header. And this column header right here kept me from doing the pivot table. So this is profit. Okay. All right, I'm just going to take a piece of this right here. Insert pivot table. What's missing? Oh. There we go. Let's try this. Insert pivot table. Okay, Carolyn, what do I do? I want my countries, my sales, and my costs.
Okay, so you have to go to where it says pivot table fields. And
Right,
select those headers that you need.
right. All right, so I'm going to drag sales.
Mhm.
All right, I want country. And then I'm going to look for local costs. And where are my sales?
Sales.
Sales belongs here. There we go. All right, now my boss says, well, what's my profit? And this is what I was trying to find right here where it says fields, items, settings. All right, I'm going to create a calculated field. And what this is going to do is it's going to insert a column with a formula. All right, so what I want is the difference between my sales and my cost, which I'm going to call profit. All right. And the formula for that, I'll get rid of the zero because I don't need a zero. It starts with an equal sign, and it is, what is profit? Well, it's sales, insert that field. I'm going to hit minus and local costs, insert field. Okay. And ta-da, that's it. So no matter what country you pick or how you filter it, these formulas will always be there. And and again, I apologize, you know, the webinar, there's a box at the top, the webinar was hiding this. I could not find it. But this is very, very important because if you resort this anyway, these formulas will remain. If you were to do this, if you were to go outside of this box and say equals this minus this, oh, that's ugly. You get the same number. But if you resort your data at all, this number no longer applies because it's looking for some very specific cross-reference. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Was it worth waiting for?
Yes, no, it was. And so my other question is, say if you turned it from row to column, it's like you said, it just stays, the calculation just stay, just, you know, change
Yep.
the.
Okay,
look of it.
so what should let's see. I could do this. I'm going to drag this over here. That didn't make sense. That's a count. Trying to, all right, let's bring it up here. Let's pick again, Brazil. So this is the number I'm looking for. All right, I want to make sure that this 8626, right? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my sales country up and I'm going to just filter on Brazil. And there's my number. You see what I mean? So that formula never has to be fiddled with. I could put it up here in the front, never changes. So that's the value of doing the formula in the pivot table.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Anything else? I know it was a lot to cover and I appreciate you sticking with me, but the whole point of this was to show you some possibilities and some real world references. So my recommendation is to go to Google and type in pivot tables, you know, Excel pivot tables, Excel sort, Excel sum. This is how I learned a lot of the tools. Google is wonderful for that. So I want to thank all of you for your time. I wish you all the best of luck in your fields. I know this is a pretty challenging year, that's to say the least. And thank you very much for your time and your patience. And I hope I've helped. Bye now.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much again, Carol.
You are welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.